I think firstly that they should value themselves. Secondly, that they can learn and always learn. And the third thing is they can make a different choice if they want to.
Hey, welcome to the Go Encourage podcast, where I talk to real people about real life, trying to gain insight from their experiences and their thoughts around courage. Today, I'm joined by Ian Smith, who is CEO of a charity called East to West here in Surrey. Hello, Ian. How are you?
Hi, Rix. I'm doing okay. Thank you. Yeah, fine.
Excellent. I'm so glad that you're joining us today on the Go Encourage podcast. Thank you for coming.
It's a real pleasure to be here.
Amazing. I thought we can get straight into it, if that's okay.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you what your name means to start off. Ian, do you know what it means?
I do. It's Scottish for John.
Is it?
And it means blessed by God.
I didn't know it was Scottish for John.
Yes, and Scots spell Ian slightly differently. They've got another I in there.
Right.
But mine's the English derivation. And
And it means, sorry, did you say?
Blessed by God.
Blessed by God. We've had some incredible names on this podcast. That's a really good one. Do you feel blessed by God?
I certainly do. Yeah, no, I do.
Where did you grow up? Where are you from?
I'm from Kent.
Oh, you're
I
from
grew
Kent?
up in Maidstone in Kent for many years. Went to school there. Was born there. And then moved up here for work when I finished my A-levels. Came up here to join the Inland Revenue and worked for them for 20 odd years.
Right.
So, yeah.
Please don't switch off the podcast just yet, guys. He doesn't work for them anymore. No, I'm joking. Good career at the Inland Revenue.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I know it's not fashionable to say so, but I worked for the collection side. So there was always something different every day when you're meeting with people, and also being in court, going out with a bailiff, lots of different varieties of work. And I felt that I was helping. I know in one sense it sounds a bit daft, but I felt that by collecting taxes, I was helping the country to operate. So
Right.
a bit highfalutin, if I know.
I'm just going to hide my tax figures over here. I haven't quite got there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm just looking there. So and then I was very fortunate. So 10 years into my role, I then joined the management training. And that just opened my eyes to how people view themselves. And I was able to really get into a lot of assertiveness training, a lot of self-esteem, customer service, obviously that type of thing. But just the real sense of, again, enabling people to view themselves differently. And it was fascinating to see how people in the revenue, obviously it was in the revenue, how they viewed what they did and how they viewed themselves. It was a time when they would often introduce themselves as, I'm just a.
Right.
And now, whenever I working with my team now, if anybody says I'm just a, I say no, don't ever say that. And it really used to be with obviously the revenue is very hierarchical, so it would be the people on the lower levels, and they would say I'm just this, and I used to say to them, that's daft to think that, because if you're not in the office, people notice immediately. If the office manager isn't there, they'll notice, but not for a long time. But you don't open the post. You don't answer the telephone.
That front level
Exactly.
sort of stuff, yeah.
Value who you are and what you bring. And I used to do a lot of work with those guys to try and help them see the value that they bring to the office that they happen to be in.
When would you say that was? What were you talking about?
So I joined the revenue 79. Yeah, so 79. So
a very different world to what's out there now in terms of self-esteem and speaking well over yourself and things like
Absolutely. No, it was very much, I mean, it was even the days before computers, if you can believe that. So this type of environment where you're thinking about speaking about how you feel, you didn't do that.
Yeah.
And the expectation that people saw you as something less than who you were, I think was because you were of the role you were in was prevalent, and that's it didn't sit right with me.
Wow. I didn't think we'd get to that so early in the podcast. It's brilliant.
Sorry.
No, it's fantastic. I think it's good. If I rewind a little bit to when you were a young boy, did you have an ambition or an aspiration to go down a certain path, or did you kind of go with the flow?
No, I know my dad was worked in a paper mill that was in our town. I knew I didn't want to do that, but I didn't actually know what I wanted to do. So I studied things that I wanted to do. I studied history because I love it. I didn't go to university because I couldn't see what it was. I'd want to go and study history, but I couldn't see what I could do with it.
Right.
And so I chose not to. Now, realizing what you can actually learn through studying history, I wish I had, but that's fine. So I never really knew what it was I wanted to do. And then I was invited, my uncle worked for the revenue up here. He asked me to take on a summer job, and kind of the rest is history in that sense. I found I enjoyed it, fitted in, and went from there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Excellent. And what is it that you do now?
Well, I'm now chief exec at East to West. So East to West is a local charity.
Right.
We work across northwest Surrey into the outskirts of West London, into Berkshire and Hampshire. And what we're aiming to do is trying to support young people who are struggling to sometimes simply engage with their education. Quite often they are feeling very anxious. They are having behavioural issues, and the school want us to come alongside them and enable them to begin to see there is a different response to how they're feeling. So if a young person is struggling with sitting in class, often it will come out through, they'll just get annoyed with somebody, they'll hit somebody, they'll get excluded. If we can sit down and find out the root cause of why they are feeling like that, and then begin to help them put in place some coping mechanisms, often we find that what they're going through isn't going to change. And I use this example quite often with, if your things at home are bad, often things at home won't get better quickly. But what you can do, what you personally can do to respond differently to what is happening can change, and that will make your life more effective. We talk about bringing hope to young lives, and it's that. If you can change the way you respond to a situation, then you can help bring hope into your life. Because if you don't change, then you're seen as this, a troubled young person, a nuisance. If
doors start to close for you.
Exactly. Exactly. People just look at you and they say, oh, that's so-and-so. But if you begin to make the change yourself, then you can also manage how other people see you. It takes time, but that's our goal, is to really bring hope to young lives, enable young people to make different choices when they're faced with challenges, and then to just move on, and
How did that come about? Was this something that happened because East to West is a charity, that's right. And so did you partner with the school in the early days and sort of put out a program?
It's interesting, East to West history, because we started off very much as a guy called Steve Holloway coming in and as an itinerant evangelist who wanted to help local churches be more effective at reaching both their own young people, but also young people in the community. So he would put on events, he would speak at churches, and he would speak at local schools. And gradually he brought a couple of other guys around him, Andy Burns being one of them, who was the first CEO of East to West. And what they used to do was to go into a school, speak about a particular issue that the school was struggling with, and then walk away. And the school said to them, it's brilliant what you're doing. We love the fact you're going to do this. But what you're not doing is helping us address it, because then the kids get all, we've got to ask more questions about this. The teachers aren't equipped to do it. And so they struggle to kind of say, well, you've opened a can of worms. So when they asked us then to say, well, can you not put somebody in place in the school to begin to help us work through those? And that's really where we started. So we started with 2 or 3 schools in the local area, over in Staines, one here in Ashford, and really began to then learn what it meant to do relational support work.
So a school, it sounded like it was school led then. It was the school saying, hey, can you come in and help us out? That's wonderful, because then you're not coming in as experts saying this is how you need to do things.
No.
It's a collaboration between both of you, which is
great. It
is.
And it was the sense that we could help them work through a large number of different issues as well. We weren't specialists in abuse or anything like that. We had skills across a broad range of, and it attracted very different people to come and work alongside us. Yeah, so the kinds of people who work for East to West come from a range of backgrounds, but the common thing is the passion for young people. They really want to see those young people experience hope and begin to make different choices. It's interesting because we often think that we want choices that we would make for them.
Right.
If you think about it, you can see a young person making a choice that's going to go down the wrong direction. So, of course, you want to get them to make the choice you would make, given all your experience and given all of your life experience. But one of the key things is try to help them understand the choice they can make without all of that.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why we always speak to schools and say to schools that we will work with a young person as long as they need us to work with them. We don't see this as a short-term stick-in plaster. Sometimes young people need that, and that's fine. But really our strength lies in the fact that we will walk that journey with a young person for as long as they need us to do that.
Right.
And for some young people, we've worked with them for a couple of years. Some we've travelled the journey all the way through from year 7 through to year 11. And I remember one of the team just celebrating a cohort of youngsters that she had worked with right through that period, seen them do their GCSEs and move on.
Wow.
And that exhilaration at seeing them actually sit their exams was something. It was lovely to see. And it wasn't a question of did they do well.
Sure.
They sat them.
Yeah.
Man, that was a major achievement for those youngsters.
And to put it into context there, touching on what you said earlier, this young person could have been expelled. And would never have had that opportunity because they're reacting to maybe things that are going on at home, like you said, or an experience in their life or something like that. But here's an opportunity to actually put that to one side, maybe. Can I use that language? Or
that is absolutely. In fact, it's interesting because sometimes a school will say, look, you're the last chance. Say to our team, you're the last chance. And it ends up with that young person staying at the school. And that's really great if they can, because of the choices they're beginning to make. Sometimes it doesn't work. And of course, we're not miracle workers and we're not the silver bullet. But what we always want to do is try and help a young person, an individual young person, make the right choice for themselves. You can't always do that.
Would you say it comes under counselling then? Or is it
looser? It's looser. We do have counsellors, professional counsellors, and we've got those in 4 schools and they're doing an astonishing job. And they work in the same way as it's relational, it's long-term, it's an investment in high-need young people because the schools are evidencing a lot of higher need youngsters. No, when I talk about relational support work, it's a very distinct skill set that says, I'm working with you to hear what you are saying, understand where you're coming from, begin to reflect back what you're saying so that you can hear it through your own ears, and then begin to think, if I do that, then what? What different choice could I make? So we might not go back into the issues they faced when they were young children, but what we'll do is we'll say, because of that, you are here. Now what can we do to make the future different for you? So youth mentoring, that I suppose would be something which some people would get. The reason we call it relational support is because we want to develop the relationship with the young person. And it's different to then what happens normally within a school, where teachers, the ELSAs, the other the inclusion managers, they've got a very limited amount of time to really work with the young person, simply because of the sheer number of young people. If you've got 1,400 people in a school, you don't have the time that we have, where we can work with group, 20 or 30 young people at any one point. So
amazing. And where did you say you cover in the UK?
We're across Northwest Surrey.
Northwest Surrey.
We're in Spelthorne, Elmbridge, Woking.
Right.
We've got schools in Runnymede and in Epsom. We're also over in Basingstoke. We've just started at Reading, and we're also into a number of the schools in West London. So it's broadening out. We've grown over the last year and a half. We've grown from 15 to 18 team members to now 40 team members. 40,
wow. In the last, 18 months?
In the last 18 months,
And how long has East to West been going?
25 years.
25 years.
We celebrated our 25th last year.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I guess with that, I'm assuming with that you've had lots of students who've given some feedback and said how it's helped their life, etc.
Oh yeah, it's been great feedback. One youngster we had just last week, who the primary age youngster, and he came up to the relational support worker he was working with, and just said, I didn't know I could manage myself. Wow. I thought I was like this, and now I know I can. And it's that kind of thing that you just see young people making different choices about what they can do, because they know now they've got that opportunity. But it takes time. Relationships don't grow within one or two sessions. They need time to invest in them, and the young person needs to know you're there for them, and you really want to hear what they're saying, not simply to arrange or to get to a point.
I wasn't going to ask you this, but it's come to mind. Just the power of structure. So that consistency in terms of building that relationship, creating those spaces where you've got time with that person.
Yeah.
And then allowing for freedom within that structure, so you're not giving them a set program or telling them what to think or what they should do, or studies have shown if you do this, etc., etc. It's just empowering them to go. You have a choice in the way that you want to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you might use worksheets. You might do some things which kind of help them understand that anger builds up. This is why anger might build up. Identifying it, but ultimately, you just want a very free and easy, focused conversation, but as much as possible, simply giving them the time to talk.
Amazing. It's great. I think it's great what you do as an organisation.
Thank you.
And what's it like sort of trying to steer the ship there with East to West for you?
Well, I've been doing it now for the last 3 months. So it's very different moving into the CEO's role.
But just to say, 3 months moving into the role, but you've been there.
Oh, I've been with East to West now for 13 years.
13 years. So you're part of the culture. You're part of the family there.
Yeah. It's again, I think it's all about people. I think what we want to do as an organisation is support young people. What I want to do personally as moving into this role, and what I've always wanted to do as I was head of operations for the last 13 years, what I've always wanted to do in all of those roles was to enable the team to do what they did well. Because if they're worried about the stuff at the back, they're not going to focus on that young person. I've always wanted to say to the team, you are well trained, you're valued, and you can just simply focus because you can rely on us to get the other stuff right. And as a CEO, what I've come to realize is how important our values are again. Right. And what I've begun to do is really think about what do those values mean to somebody who's been here for 10 years, somebody who's been here for 10 months, somebody who's been here for 2 months. What do those values mean? What does it mean to say that we are compassionate, we are a community? What does that mean to you when you're in a school, you are faced with the third young person who's just tried to self-harm them? What is that? And so for me, it's about enabling the team again, not only to feel safe, but really begin to think, what are the roots of our work? What is it that because people do relational support work, they call it different things, but they do it all over the place. And that's brilliant. Many other organizations that we partner with do that. I think what's distinctive and what I really want to see the team get is the sense of the ethos behind it.
Right.
That enables relationship to be genuine relationship, not a transactional relationship. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's really good. I'm starting to think about relationships in general, outside of this, and that's kind of how it works, isn't it? Is to have that relationship, that growing to know someone, growing. I mean, I'm thinking marriage and couple relationships, but across the board, your siblings, your friendships and stuff like that. If it's transactional, there's not really much in it, much longevity in that. But if it's because you're interested in the person, you value the person, etc. There's power in that, and there's a release in terms of being vulnerable.
There is, and I think what it actually says to the team member is that I'm valued because of who I am, not what I bring. I think for too many organizations, and I've seen it in Christian organizations as well, unfortunately, that sense of you value somebody because they add value to your bottom line. People shouldn't be valued for that. They will be, because ultimately you've got to exist, but they're valued because they're valuable. And helping people to see that, then they bring the change in their own thought process, the sense of seeing them grow in their own confidence, their own ability to speak about what they're doing, that grows with it. And then because they know that they're valued for who they are.
That's good. And there's courage. There's courage in that, because you could be just a number, a statistic. You could think of yourself as a number, a statistic, a label. This is my function. This is what I do. I tick the boxes. I go home. But we're looking at it from the perspective of actually you're valuable for who you are, and therefore there's courage in that, in terms of lifting yourself up, encouraging others in the team to be the best that they could be. Again, not in terms of the output that they're putting out there, but actually who they are on the inside. And I just love the way it ties in with what you're saying to young people as well, because it's the same thing, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely the same thing. And I think courage comes in because for every one of the team, they've made a choice to join East to West. And some have left or they could have gone in one direction, and they've chosen to join East to West because they've seen what difference they can make in the lives of a young person. And I think those kind of choices do take courage. I can earn X amount doing this, but I'm going to choose to earn Y amounts doing this. And it's not always a financial thing, but it actually takes, I'm making a different, definite choice to do it this way and for this reason. And I think as an organization, you have to know why you're doing what you're doing and where you're going to say no.
Right.
And I think if a school said to me, I would like you to come in, you've got to do it this way, and it doesn't allow us to be relational with the young people, then we have said no. And that takes, because it's an income stream.
Sure.
If I'm being brutally honest.
Yeah.
And why say no to an income stream? Well, because it doesn't allow us to be relational with those young people. And there are plenty of other organisations out there that will do that for you. Go use them.
Absolutely.
This is what we bring to the table.
And I think that's the beauty of having vision, because when you have a vision, you're going in a direction, aren't you? You're casting vision. We're about this, and this is where we're going.
Yeah.
And anything that doesn't line up with that vision can sort of be left on the side, which can be scary, because we live in a world which we don't want to miss out on things, and we want to be all things. We want to be able to help everyone. But actually, sometimes when you help everyone, or you try to help everyone, you end up helping nobody, because you're not in alignment with your values. So, well,
that's it. I always one of the things that I've taught in, and I've read a lot of Jim Collins' books, The Good to Great, Built to Last, that kind of thing. One of the things, and I was saying this to somebody just yesterday, he talks about, what are you passionate about? What are you best at? And what drives your income stream? And he said, where's the intersect, the Venn diagram? That's where you focus. So if you're working with young people, and that's your focus, don't work with old people. It's that sense of where's your focus, because you're passionate about it. That's the thing. Yes, you want to be the best at it, but really it's where does your passion lie? But it helps you then focus on what it really means about bringing hope to young people. It's really, really important.
What was the name of the book and the author? And I'll put a link in the description for anyone who's listening.
Jim Collins, Built to Last, Good to Great is brilliant. And he's also done a smaller book which is focused on charities, because Good to Great is very much about corporate America.
Right.
But he's also done a smaller monograph on what it means to apply these principles to charities.
Okay.
Definitely worth reading.
All right. You heard it here. Ian's recommendation. That's really good, Ian. Oh, I could ask you loads of questions about East to West. But what we'll do is we'll pause. We'll come back, and I just want to ask you a few questions about yourself, so that people can learn a little bit about yourself, if that's okay.
Okay.
So it's a question I throw out there to people who come on the podcast, and that is, would you say, there's a series of these, bear with me, would you say that you lean more towards being an introvert or lean more towards being an extrovert?
Definitely an introvert.
An introvert, okay.
Yeah.
You source energy from having some alone time and processing.
Yeah, I need that time. I like cycling, generally by myself, because you can think and process, do a lot of reading. I enjoy time by myself.
What kind of things do you read?
Primarily historical, non-fiction, a lot of things about this World War I, World War II. Always interested in military history, the impact it's made on the wider society. Just getting a sense of, obviously battles are battles, but also how the individuals who were involved in those battles what they went through, that type of thing. So
excellent. Wow.
Strategy is always interesting.
I'm making connections with East to West again with that, giving what choices did people make, given the circumstances.
Exactly.
Have you heard of the love languages test?
I've heard of it. It's not something that, people talk about it. It's not something which has ever struck me as something I'd want to kind of jump on. But
why is that? Why is that? If you don't mind me asking. I use and I enjoy personality tests. I do. They are. I know they're not tests, personality assessments, whatever you want to call them. But I'm always concerned, particularly around love, that you can get pigeonholed. And I want to see what that means in a love relationship, to
just learn from one another rather than take a test and say, oh, I love to serve. Oh, okay, then.
That's all I'm going to do.
That's all I'm going to do. Yeah. Because there's so much, we're rounded characters, we're rounded people, and we need to understand that serving looks very different in this relationship as it did in this one. And how we interact and again, the choices that we make in those interactions will determine the health of a marriage, not the fact that I'm ticking this box.
Sure.
Probably that's not a popular view, but
no. Actually, it's funny because I come across people who are kind of split between the two. I think, not that you asked, but my opinion here is, I think it's good to bring language. It's good. They're good. These personality tests are good to understand yourself a little bit better.
Yeah.
And then they're also good to bring language when you're trying to explain how you might feel or how you might reciprocate or receive love, I should say.
Yes.
Which is great. But the danger is if you use them a bit like a horoscope and then you say, well, actually, I'm a Sagittarius now, so I cannot function if I'm not with another Sagittarius or whatever, what other horoscope names they are.
And I think too that we've just gone through a series of these assessments at East to West, and they're really helpful to begin to think, how does the team function? What are the strengths that you bring to the table? So they're helpful. But as I say, if all I say is, well, your genius is working geniuses.
Is that the name of the assessment?
It's 6 Types of Working Genius, by Lencioni, which is, phenomenal. Anything by Lencioni is brilliant. But if I say to somebody, well, you've got a working frustration in inventiveness, so I won't even begin to ask you to invent a solution or begin to think about an invent. I'm cutting off somebody who could come up with something just because it inspires them, interests them. So they're helpful as a good guide to how you engage with people, but they mustn't be seen as the be all and end all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Would you say you lean to your logical side more or more to your emotional side?
Nah,
logic, history, logic, inland revenue.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was exploring faith, I came and lived up here and got to know some people who went to my church, and she was my boss at the time, and they talked to me a lot about faith. They talked to me a lot about Christ, and I didn't. It was interesting. It was helpful. They answered a lot of questions, but it was not until somebody one Wednesday evening went through and said, "Here's Christ in the Old Testament. Here is Christ in the Old Testament. Here's the outworking of what the Old Testament said." And it was that sense of God used that to say, okay, here's the reality. And I accepted Christ. And it was, was it logical? No, God was at work in that. But it was that sense of he used I wanted to see the process. That was really important to me.
Okay. Yeah. Are you more of a make things happen person, or do you kind of go with the flow? You got to watch what you say here, because you're CEO of an organisation.
I was just thinking, who's going to watch this? I don't know about making things happen. I feel it's important to be in a place where I can influence what is happening. It was interesting. We had a long discussion, an elders meeting, just about kind of what was it that you felt you would miss? Is it about control? Is it about, and I realized it's not about control, it's about influence.
Right.
So I like to be in a position where I can help influence what is happening. So it's not necessarily, it would almost go in the way I feel it should do, but I've helped shape the way it's going to go.
Right. I don't know if you've read much of John Maxwell's stuff, but he says leadership is influence.
Yeah.
And the two are, the
21 irrefutable rules
That's it.
is
He's got a
brilliant.
few.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
What's a good compliment that you remember that's been said about you? I'm sure there's a long list.
I'd like to think so. I think kindness, actually. People would say I'm kind and I care. I don't always show that, but I think that's what some people have said about me.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. I wanted to ask you, in terms of productivity, in terms of getting things done in your day and setting yourself up for that, do you have a routine or a habit or a system in place that you use on a day-to-day?
Not really. I certainly want to. I always sit down and want to get my emails cleared, all the important ones, before I start to interact with people. I always try to get in early in order to do that. I think one of my challenges has always been that I need a goal ahead of me. So if I'm going to go and do a cycling training, it's got to be because I'm going to be riding for something in the future. If I'm learning the piano, I've got to do grades. I can't just play for pleasure, that kind of thing. So I think I've always struggled with kind of having a routine that doesn't lead to achieving something. Don't know why, but that
makes sense.
Yeah,
that's good. That's why you're a CEO as well, because you have a vision, right? You want to go somewhere.
Right. Yeah, totally true. Yeah,
amazing. Okay, cool. All right, so I wanted to ask you this big question, and we can break it down if you like. But when you think of the word courage, what comes to mind? What does that word mean for you?
I think it means the ability to look at things and change. And it can be change your response to it, or it can be try and change the situation. I'm very conscious that for many of us, you're going down a certain route. It's comfortable, it's easy, you just keep on going down that road, and you know that ultimately, some nice things will happen. And then you're faced with a choice, and the courage is, do you, in a sense, park the easy route and go down the harder route? And that for me is what courage looks like. It's making that choice.
And going against the grain if need be.
Absolutely. And sometimes, interesting to think about my earlier comment, but it's almost not making the logical choice. It's saying, actually, I feel there's a real value to me being involved in this, and therefore I want to engage with it. I think it's right to engage with it. And definitely there are times when you will say, believe, do something which others find difficult to understand. And you need to know, have a confidence that what you're doing is right then. Yeah.
So I guess you touch on the word confidence. I think that sounds like that plays a key part in your understanding of what courage looks like.
Yes, it does. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so keen that people, and I'm not talking about just self-esteem just because, the buzzword, but that sense of having a sense of self that says, I can, and then because you need that confidence in yourself in order to make a different choice. And it goes, I was saying earlier, if it goes back to I'm just a, and that's what you think you are, just a, then you won't say to yourself, well, when I'm faced with this choice, which may not be the easy choice, because I'm just a, I won't go down that road.
Yeah.
If I say to myself, I've got a sense of who I am, and whether you're a Christian or not, but if you're a Christian, a sense of who you are in Christ, then I believe that you can then make that choice to say, I have value. I can feel the call of God. I can do this. And I think too often we don't go down that road. And that for me is courage.
And for someone listening who might not live in that world, what you're saying is who I am in Christ is linked with I am a valuable human that this creator of the universe has created for a purpose. Yeah. And so there's a sense of I'm valuable.
Yes.
I matter.
Yes.
You know.
Absolutely.
And then when you were talking about I'm just a this or I'm just a that and therefore I don't have the power. Rosa Parks and other people in history who weren't people of, large influence were able to make huge decisions that had a ripple effect.
Exactly.
Across
and
humanity.
I think it's again, they chose. They had a sense that today I'm not going to. And I think, and sometimes you're faced with that kind of almost dramatic opportunity, but a lot of the times it's a day to day, I'm choosing to do this, I'm choosing to say this, I'm choosing to act in this way. And I don't know what the impact is going to be. And I think that's is also the big thing around courage. You don't always know what's going to happen.
It's a great point.
But you still feel this is what I have been asked to do. This is what I've been called to do. And even if you're not of faith, that sense of understanding that you are a valuable human being and therefore you can make a choice to make a difference in somebody else's life. It's not walking by on the other side.
Yeah, totally. That's really good. I like the idea of not knowing what the future is going to hold. Has nothing to do with whether you're courageous or not.
No.
Because what history has shown us, and you'd probably know a lot more than I do because I don't read a lot, but from my understanding is when you operate from a place of fear and you act like you're courageous, you tend to fall into, well, I say tend, there's a danger of falling into a tyrannical sort of, structure, which is not courageous. Actually, that's fear and control, isn't it?
It is, and I think again, it's this whole sense of what's the prevailing. You think back to Big Brother, 1984. It's that sense of do I simply, because the world says this, then that's what the world is. That's not courage. That is, I'm just surviving. And I think that's a fundamental difference. You can survive and you don't know that that's all you're doing, but in many ways that's what you're doing. You're surviving, or you're taking control. That's not true, but you are courageously making a different choice, and you don't know where that's going to go.
It's really good. Yeah, I like that. Because so many people do it, right?
Yeah.
On a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
The alarm button hits in the morning and you just climb out of bed and I need my coffee or I need this.
Yeah.
And you're just surviving moment to moment just to get to that next bit. Oh, I've dropped the kids off, or I've got to go pick them up now. And then by the time your head hits the pillow, you're beat. And then the same cycle goes on and on.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of what you're saying today is being empowered to know that you have a choice, you have value and you have a choice.
But I think what I wouldn't want anybody to think that, in a sense, the day to day is also not courageous, because there's many, many people who are getting up in the morning is tough because they don't know what the day is going to hold.
Agreed.
They're looking after children who are struggling with autism or whatever else. And that day the child might be really great, another day they're going to be awful. But again, they do still get up in the morning, they still love that child, and they still continue to work with that youngster. And I think there's so many different forms of courage.
I agree. Yeah.
That the day to day is also, for many, many people, a courageous act, because why would you get up?
No, I agree, and I think that's part of why Go Encourage exists. Is we're not as much as it's incredible to hear stories of people climbing Mount Everest and things like that, and if you have climbed Mount Everest and want to come and talk about it, you're more than welcome. But what I'm really interested in is the day-to-day lives of people and what kind of things come up, what obstacles, what barriers come up, and how they tackle that, you know. And quite rightly so, you just you mentioned earlier, quite rightly so, and not knowing what the result's going to be, it takes courage.
Yeah, it does.
Excellent.
It does.
Is there a book or a movie that inspired you to be more courageous in life? Anything stand out?
Oh gosh. I think partly because I read so much history, there have been many people in history, military leaders primarily, who have inspired me because they've chosen to do something different. And again, this whole sense they didn't know what that would lead to, but sometimes it led to victory, but it didn't always. There was one film, it's an old film now, called Dunkirk. And it's a fictional story about a group of soldiers who were left behind, battling to get back to the beaches in Dunkirk. And there's this corporal who never wanted to be a corporal, but was, who could have easily just said, oh, well, just surrender. You know, we've got 100 miles to go. And yet he kept pushing, he kept his men going to get to the beaches, to get off, to get home. Now, he didn't know what was going to happen. He didn't even know sometimes where he was or where the army was. But that sense of we had to do something different than simply say, oh, okay, we give up. That always, I've watched that quite a few times. It's always inspired me to think of how the choices he made. There are, obviously there are business books. But there's no one particular. I just love people who look at a situation and says it doesn't need to be like this.
Yep.
That's the thing. It doesn't need to be like this.
Yeah, that's good. I think there's a personality test, touching on personality test, but I think one of them is the reformer who looks at what's going on and tries to make the best of it, but then also says, maybe this isn't the best way to do things. Let's reform the system. Let's move forward in a way that benefits not just a few, but many.
Yes.
Which kind of ties into what you're saying there.
Yeah, I think so.
Can you think of an example? Are you welcome to give more than one example of a time where you really had to put it on the line and take a risk and dig deep and go for it?
Well, personally, I had done 20 years in the revenue, just been promoted, and I had done some work with a mission organisation in training in people in working together, bringing churches, bringing agencies to work together, and I thought that was simply a volunteering thing, and that would be it. And then they asked me to join them. So it went from a steady job, having just been promoted, with a good pension at the end of it, to raising all my own support, joining an organisation that was new and young, and knowing, really, and with Barbara, my wife, taking a real sense of this is a leap of faith, because the safe thing is to say, oh, thank you for the opportunity, but no. But I felt it was absolutely what God was calling me to. He had been preparing me for it in the way I was involved in the management training for the revenue. I felt that there was a specific time when he had very clearly said that I would be acting as a missionary at some point. Working for the revenue didn't seem to equate with that.
Worlds apart.
Yeah, well, that's right. But God has his own ways of enabling that to happen, and that's where the management training fitted in. But it was that sense, of you're leaving a safe and secure role to join, to go and try and work with people across the world who were struggling to understand how they could work together. And then that came to an end after just 3 years, or that particular role. And again, it was that sense of why bring it to an end? You'd asked me to do this. Why? And then other opportunities opened up. And again, it was that sense, though, do I go back to the revenue? That's safe. Do I move on? And I chose to move on into another organisation and was there for a number of years before joining East to West.
Right.
So from a personal perspective, that it was very much for me. I think what's also inspired me are when I've been abroad, and I particularly remember in the southern part of the Philippines, I was talking with a church leader who was running he was running a program for street children. He was running it in an old meat market. Oh. So can you imagine what that meat market was like? But he was courageous. There are many, many others who were like him, but he just sticks in my mind. He was courageous because he said, I can make a difference in the lives of a few of these children. And then went out to make it happen.
Right.
Whereas he could have sat in his church and he didn't choose to do that. Again, that for me was real courage.
Seeing so many connections in some of the stuff you're saying today in terms of your life, because that lines up so beautifully with East to West as well, right?
Well, it's interesting because that pastor, although he doesn't know it obviously, but he was directly responsible for me joining East to West.
Oh wow!
Because I was watching and talking with him, and so much of what he was concerned about was, I don't know where tomorrow's money is going to come from. I don't know where the food's coming from. I haven't got the organisation in place. And it made me realise that what I believed God called me into was operations. It was the back office, making sure things are in the right place. And so when the opportunity with East to West came up unexpectedly and completely out of the blue, again, I felt God was saying, go here. But it was another step of faith because, again, it was a young organisation and I didn't know where I fitted in that.
And with the history of you joining the previous organisation that was quite young as well, would you have had some of those thoughts that if I join this one, is it going to be long term? Is it going to be short?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So you have to push into some courage there to take that leap of faith.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was when I got turned 50, I was just praying that bear in mind, I still had a revenue mindset. 60 was the retirement age. Here I am. No, but that sense of really praying that the last 10 years, as I saw it, would count, and wanting to make it count. One of my fears has always been the sense of just drifting into something instead of making a choice, and it's
It's empowering, isn't it, when you have that choice? And it sounds throughout this conversation you've referenced your Christian faith and God calling you to things. And one of the powerful things from my understanding of Christianity is that there is choice in what we do. It's not dogmatic in nature in that it forces you to do things. Everything's by invitation, and it's your choice whether or not you choose to follow or accept or receive love or all of that stuff, which ties in beautifully with your story from the very beginning. You know, when you were in the revenue and you were noticing that people were saying, I'm just this and I don't matter. And even that early in your career, you were bothered by that. You know, it did something on the inside, which is beautiful that you've got to a place that you actually make that difference to young people's lives, you know?
I believe that's what God has called me into. It was one of the reasons why when I was asked to take on this role, I agreed to do it. Because God gives you those opportunities to serve others. And as you say, it's a choice, but I think you really need to take those when you can, you know, and they come along more often than you think, I think.
Yeah, it's having the eyes, isn't it, to see those opportunities. I had a guy on the show, Vivek, and he was talking about courage in opportunities and not letting them pass by and seeing them as obstacles, but actually everything's an opportunity, isn't it? Yeah. Are there people who come to mind that have challenged you or inspired you to grow in your courage? Anyone you'd like to shout out to?
I think one of the guys who, when I first became a Christian, encouraged me always to ask questions and really listen and talk about what the answers are. Because whenever you join something, whatever it might be, it's very easy to simply accept the prevailing situation. But he said you should always ask, listen, don't assume you know the answer, but always ask. A guy called Vic Paul was always the guy that kind of and he was my first youth leader. It's that sense of, at 19, I wasn't that young, but but that sense that he just wanted me to think. And then I think there have been people who have inspired me because they've started something up. So when I left the revenue to join Interdev, which was the first organisation, the vision that the founder had to say, the world is changing, the Soviet Union has gone, the opportunities to share the gospel are ever growing.
Right.
And we can do it the old way. So various people go in and they do their little bit and they carve up the country, or we can do it together. No, we're going to do this together. So Phil Butler was always, to my mind, a hero of John Rogers, who was my leader at the time. That sense of really helping others to see there is a different option, and with appropriate training, with thinking about it, you can make a different choice. And then Patrick McDonald, who started up an outfit called Viva based in Oxford, again working with street children. Why? Again, networking churches, because so many churches did so many good things, but they did it by themselves, and they could do so much more if they did it together. So for me, it's always been about bringing people together to do something different. East to West is the same. It's about bringing people together so that we can better support young people. You could do it by yourself, but you're not going to be as effective.
No, you're
doing
not.
it together. So it's those people who challenge the orthodoxy that I always kind of admire.
And there's so much power in uniting together, isn't there?
Yes.
Whether you're a church or an organisation or anything like that, when you work together in a team environment, the results are compound. They're multiplied, aren't they?
Yeah.
As opposed to as far as you can get to on your own.
Yeah, and it's helping people see that there are challenges to that. But asking the question, what is it that unites us? What is it that we can agree on? And focusing on that. Because if you spend all the time focusing on what you don't agree on, you'll be here till the end of time.
It's hard to find something that you completely agree on with yourself, let alone another person.
Exactly. But there are many things that we can agree to work together on without agreeing everything. And it's making that choice. So, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
If you could sum up everything that we've talked about today, and if you imagine someone's listening at home thinking, yeah, I got a lot out of that, what would you say would be the most important thing that you would want someone to leave with?
I think firstly that they should value themselves. Secondly, that they can learn and always learn. And the third thing is they can make a different choice if they want to.
Brilliant. And with those three things, if they're too much of a challenge, what would you say would be a good thing to start with?
Valuing themselves. Because I think it's where it starts. And it's not about, an arrogance. It's not an arrogance. It's simply recognizing I have value. If you're a Christian, because you know that God created you. If you're not, but the reality is you're a human being and you have value.
It's brilliant. It's such a great place to start. And I think, sadly, I haven't got any evidence to back this up in terms of statistics, but it seems like it's common that people are devaluing themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
More and more.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if we had an organization that worked with young people to help them understand their value? Recommend anywhere?
Yeah, I could think so.
Brilliant. You've talked about East to West quite a lot today, which I'm really thankful for. Is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap up today about East to West?
I think if you have a youngster in a local school that might be struggling, then get in touch with your East to West worker, see if they can help them. We're not a silver bullet, but we can offer hope.
Okay. I'm a parent. I've got a child who's struggling. I would knock on the door at school to say, have you got an East to West supporter that works here? Can my child come and receive that resource? Yeah. And go from there?
Yeah.
Excellent. Brilliant. And do you have a website that people could find you on?
Yeah. So if you want to have a look at www.easttowest.org.uk, and then you can see all about us there.
Brilliant. I'll put some links in the description as well so that people can quickly click on that and find out what you guys are all about.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and being on the Go Encourage podcast.
It's a real pleasure, Rix. Thanks very much for putting me at ease. I appreciate it.
Brilliant. I think you brought a lot of wisdom and just understanding a little bit more about what East to West does. It's been a pleasure. It's been brilliant. Hey, really hope you enjoyed that episode. If you haven't already, do hit that subscribe button because it really helps this channel grow. And if you don't already know, we now have a Courage Journal called The Courage Journal. You can find out more about this and order your copy at www.goencourage.com. So until next time, whatever you're doing in life, keep moving forward and go encourage. See you on the next one.